Welcome to Fredericksburg Mission, a podcast talking all things mental health and wellness in the Burgh, brought to you by...
How do you shorten the time it takes to buy a car? Car buying just got easier. Pohanka365.com lets you complete as much or as little of the car buying process online. Pohanka365.com. Car buying simplified. Anytime, anywhere.
Welcome to Fredericksburg Mission Podcast. My name is Angela Rivers, and today I'm here with Meghan Newkirk, an amazing author who speaks highly about OCD. Welcome, Meghan.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm really happy to have you here as well, and to speak about a subject that a lot of people think they know about, but they really don't know all that it entails.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think there's a cultural stigma or idea of what OCD actually is, and it's so much more than what people think of. So I'm happy to be here to talk about it.
Yes, thank you. So as we start, I'm going to read a little bit from my notes, just so I get everything correct, and then we'll speak freely about the subject.
Great.
So OCD, also known as obsessive compulsive behavior, it's something you experience, correct?
Yes.
And, many people experience this in silence, but you have learned how to speak about it freely, and I'm hoping that today's podcast really helps others do the same.
I hope so too. I think there's a lot of fear behind sharing that you have OCD. So I'm hoping that people will feel supported and freer to talk about it.
Yeah. There are many misconceptions about what OCD is. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what OCD is and some misconceptions or stigmas that you've heard?
Absolutely. So obsessive compulsive disorder is kind of a specialized version of anxiety. There are cycles of intrusive thoughts. That's the first part, the obsessions. And then when you have the obsessions, you have to do or perform certain sorts of compulsions in order to alleviate the anxiety that comes along with it. So the intrusive thoughts or the fears are what start it, and then the compulsive behaviors are what makes the anxiety feel better. But obviously, the more that you do these behaviors, these compulsions, the more anxiety you have because it doesn't actually fix the problem. So people often in our culture will say, I'm so OCD because they might like to have their filing folders color coordinated, or they like to be organized, or they enjoy having all their socks arranged a certain way in their drawer and they just can't stand it if it's out of order. And that's actually not what OCD is. OCD is more complex. It's more miserable. It's not something that brings enjoyment. It's something that brings pain and suffering for people mentally and internally. And so there's a whole bigger system that's happening that has a lot more to do with just liking to be organized.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about, when you were diagnosed and what that looked like for you in your own experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was diagnosed when I was 18. I think a lot of people are diagnosed younger in age. There's a lot more signs right now of what OCD looks like in children. And so I was diagnosed a little bit later. 18 doesn't sound late, but it actually is a little bit late, considering how much I suffered with it as a child. But for me, my OCD really was largely focused on harming, fear of harming people, the thoughts that come along with potentially harming someone. They're very complex thoughts, and they're usually pretty awful in nature. And so that's the first kind of area that I've struggled with. Germs is the second area, definitely a more common OCD fear for people. So kind of worrying about contamination, they call it. It's contamination fears. I had lots of fears of my children getting sick later on after being diagnosed. So that's another area. And the list goes on. I mean, people have fears and intrusive thoughts. I mean, you can have them about faith. You can have them about being afraid that you're attracted to your pet. I mean, the list goes on and on of the things. If you're driving in your car and you're worried that you might have hit somebody, and you drive around in circles thinking, let me go back and check. These are all the sorts of bizarre, I say bizarre in a very respectful way, but these very unique thoughts that take hold and can't get let go of, and then behaviors follow.
And the feelings are very real. Was there a trigger to you feeling a certain fear or a certain way about something?
So for me, I would say when I was 8 years old, I had an appendicitis, and I was in the hospital for about a week. And for that whole week, I felt very nauseated the whole week. And so I actually started off with a fear of vomiting. And so for lots and lots of years, I just lived in fear of that. And that's kind of when my mom says that something flipped for me. And it went from just kind of being a more cautious child to needing to check all the time about certain things, that really she became my reassurance person. And it was an unhealthy pattern of behavior. So that was my first real experience with the obsession and then leading to the compulsion.
Yeah. And is that why you're afraid of harming people now, or do you still feel that way?
I think I do have threads of it. I think because I'm medicated, it's much more controlled. I mean, we all have thoughts that are weird and bizarre, and we just have to let them go. And so for me, it's having to relearn how to not let my brain sink into them and give them power. And so I'm way better than I ever was. And I would argue that I'm probably more rehabilitated, so to speak, in a really good place. But it sneaks in, and I still have to be on guard for it. Especially with my children, being fearful of harming them in some way, or if I lose my temper, like not labeling myself as an abusive mother, and then that cycle that goes along with that, it can cross over very easily into OCD for me. But I have strategies and I have a therapist, so it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, you have to be a little bit rehabilitated, I feel like, to be able to speak about it freely. Because when you're in the throes of it, it would be more difficult.
Yeah, it's been very cleansing for me to write the book and be able to talk about it with you. And yeah, it's been a really actually surprisingly fun experience to be able to talk about it like this and be confident about it.
Yeah. And compulsions, let's talk about that a little bit. Is it, some people say they have OCD and then they say they have a behavior that follows, but it doesn't necessarily result in a compulsion, like an actual OCD familiarity. What does that look like, an actual compulsion?
So an example from my own life would be hand washing in middle school. That's definitely a stereotypical one, but I'm going to use it because I think people resonate with it. But it's this idea that you would touch something and become contaminated and then need to cleanse yourself of that contamination. But it has to feel a certain way as you're doing it in order for it to be done. And I think that's where compulsions really show their ugly side. Because any compulsion for anybody is going to be repetitive and it's going to be very unfulfilling. So there's going to be this expectation of relief only to get more anxiety. And so for me, like hand washing or even cleaning my counters, like if I'm cooking chicken, I've had to learn to wipe once and then walk away. And that's been really hard because I'm tempted to wipe and wipe and wipe and keep wiping until it feels just right, which it never really does. So that's one example of a compulsion. Another one for me would be ruminating about situations or conversations, something maybe I thought I did wrong, and it's replaying it over and over and over and over. And it's not just I'm going to remember that and think about it, but it's an actual attempt at recreating something in order to feel a certain way to get relief. It's really hard to articulate it. But I think we've all been in a situation where we've tried to solve a puzzle, solve a mystery, something like that. it's kind of like that where you're trying to figure something out and it has to feel like you have. But most of these things are not certain, and it makes it a lot harder to find an end point.
And life's not certain, or perfect.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No,
So
it's neither of those things.
Yeah. So like you said, it won't just feel just right. It'll be
No.
hard to get there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there times when your thoughts are more present and to really be more aware of what's going on?
Yeah. So for me, this may be a little bit of TMI, but for me, there's a hormonal aspect. There's definitely, with my cycle, I can tell when my thoughts are more rapid and when I feel a little bit less confident in my strategies. I definitely felt great when I was pregnant with my 3 kids. I always felt really balanced mentally. And then after they were born, when I was nursing, I felt fairly good. And then as they started to stop nursing, I would start to have the intrusive thoughts again. They were always there, but it was easier. I do find that now that I'm more practiced in my strategies, I can feel rest a little bit easier than I used to in those hard times. But I do have to go to my loved ones and say, are you seeing OCD in my life right now? Are you, is this OCD or is this just being a mom, And so I do have good counsel, which is essential.
And how do you talk to your kids about it?
You asked that question in the email and I was like, I don't know how to answer that. My oldest is 12, and he's very, very tenderhearted. I have talked with him about it, and then I will mention something about it and he'll have forgotten the entire conversation that we had about my OCD, and he'll go, what are you talking about? And I'm like, we talked about this. My daughters know that I wrote a book, and they know that I wrote it about something that's different about my brain. They know that I have to take medicine for my brain every day, but that's about the extent of it. They just know me as mom, and I try to interject certain things when it's appropriate. But it's been hard to decipher when and how to talk to them and at what level. But my son definitely has tendencies like mine. And so I am always talking to him about strategies already.
Do you find that you're hyper focused on, when you see him doing certain things to try to prevent him so that he doesn't have the fear or the compulsion or anything of that as he grows older?
Yeah, I would say with all 3 of my kids, I mean, it's normal when you're growing up to have little seasons of, and I think all 3 of my kids have had seasons where I go, is that OCD? And I just have to kind of open my hands and go, you know what, they're going to struggle with whatever they're going to struggle with. And if OCD is one of them, man, bring it on. I'm game on. I know what to do. So I'm hoping that they don't have to tackle that. But if it's not that, it'll likely be something else that we'll have to walk through together.
That's a really good point. Me as a mom, I'm hyper focused on certain things, certain things that I've been through or my husband's been through. We don't want them to be like us in certain ways, and I think that's normal for being a mom or a father. And the way you put it is so brilliant. It's going to be something. If it's not this, it might be something else, and that's okay. There's no reason to fear it.
Right. And that's the goal, is to never, for me anyway, never put that expectation of OCD on them. And so I do try to balance how much I share about my own experiences with wisdom. And I'm a pretty open book all the time. So I'm sure there's times where they sense that I'm anxious about something, and I have to just kind of, for my 6-year-old, I might say one thing. For my 10-year-old, I'll say something else, and my 12-year-old will get a little bit more of an explanation. But I try to be wise. I know I've probably failed in some ways, but that's okay.
And has there been something, that's gotten you through all of this, like some type of outlet or self-care that you've been able to really latch on to make sure that, to let you know that it's going to be okay?
I think there's lots of things. I think the first one is my faith, most of all. I think I have a very strong Christian faith, and I think relying on God and my church family and having good friends who are able to point me back to where real peace comes from. I think that's the the primary thing for me. And then I would think also self-care, a big one for me is actually running. It's a good reset for my brain. And so any sort of physical activity like that has been a big blessing too, for just resetting. If I feel like maybe my serotonin levels aren't quite right, going for a good run definitely helps too.
And to calm your brain down a little bit too, so it's not overworking. You can exhaust it a little bit.
Yes, it definitely is a good reset button for me. And I feel like I can come back a little bit calmer.
Yeah. Do you find when you're running, you kind of let go, or do you think all the thoughts? Is there just a way to help your brain reset?
Yeah, I think there's a freedom that comes with running, and that you can, it's just one foot in front of the other. It's a good reminder for me that the world is bigger. I can run around my neighborhood and see all the different houses, and and then of course you get the physical endorphins, which does not hurt anything at all.
Yeah. And then, you spoke a little bit about, you wrote a book. What is your book, and why did you write a book?
So my book was very accidental. I didn't intend to write a book. It's a fiction book called Loving Naomi, and it's about a young girl. And it's really an expression of my own experience with coming to terms with my OCD. It's my creative way of trying to explain to my kids what OCD is. Writing has certainly become a very healthy outlet for me, of creativity and mental relaxation. And this book was kind of an outpouring of that. And I really felt like there was a little bit of a hole in kind of resources for people where the main character had OCD and leads a normal and healthy life. I'm a big reader, and I've read a lot of books with main characters with OCD, and they're all pretty down. And I thought, this is not what OCD has to look like. And I wanted to give a positive spin. And so the book accidentally got written. It was supposed to be a short story. And then 80,000 words later, I was like, oh, that's a little longer than a short story. So ended up publishing it, and have really enjoyed seeing the outpouring of support, and how it's been used as a tool for people to kind of find relief and feel like it's okay to get help. It's okay to get medicine and to go to therapy.
And where is the book if somebody wanted to purchase it?
It's on Amazon.com. You can buy it straight from there. And, feel free to leave a review if you read it and you want to leave an honest review. Would be awesome. But yeah, you can find it at Amazon under Loving Naomi.
And besides your book, you also write a blog. I was pouring through all of your stories on your blog, and a lot of them really hit home, just with people I know or scenarios in life. And it's really great. It really is. You touched on the pandemic and how it was a new uncertainty for you. It was a new uncertainty for a lot of people. How did you cope during the pandemic? That must have been so difficult. The hand washing, the germs, the fear of somebody dying. I mean, that must have been so scary.
Well, it's interesting. I have been asked that question many times. And as I reflect on the last year, I think I was probably better equipped than a lot of people for tackling the pandemic because of the strategies I'd practiced so much. So I thought that germs were going to kill me for a long time. And I've spent a lot of years working through that fear. And so I kind of knew what to do on a mental level, and found myself giving comfort to people who had never had any anxiety before. And suddenly they were, just kind of overwhelmed with this sense of, oh my gosh, I've never thought about these things before. And I was like, well, I've thought about them, and I have had lots of therapy, and I can give you some strategies. And so that was definitely a blessing, that I was able to kind of have some ideas in my head already of how to handle this. It was a little bit conflicting for my brain when our society was saying to do things that I've worked really hard not to do as compulsions, like wipe off my groceries and, wear a mask everywhere. That was kind of like, oh gosh, this is kind of counter to what I've been told my whole life in therapy. So there was a little bit of a conflict there with those, but I think I was able to utilize all that I'd worked through and to help other people, which I hope it was a help to other people, because there were a lot of things we were all feeling that we had to work through together.
Yeah, with your blog, with, your book, with helping people verbally, I think you're touching a lot of different lives.
I hope so. That's what I would love to be able to do.
Do you see yourself writing another book?
Yes, I would love to. The question is, what do I write about? Because I had another book actually started, which actually you're the first person I've ever told that to, about depression, actually, with the main character with depression. And then people started reading Loving Naomi and they started going, where's the sequel? And so now I'm conflicted and I don't know what to write next. So I'm trying to focus on like feeling that inspiration of what do I need to write next and what's the most important.
And, you said you wrote that, to share with your children how you feel. Did your 12-year-old son, did he get to read it?
Well, let me tell you the funny thing about my child. He does not like to read at all. He has an author for a mother and he hates to read. So he has not read it yet. It's also a romance. So it doesn't have any sports or any mystery in it. So he is not interested at all yet. My nephew is actually 14 and he just asked my sister if he could read it. So I think he'll probably be the first of the crew to suffer through the romance that I know he will just not enjoy.
But sometimes you need that story,
Well, and actually his dad and my sister are kind of inspiration for some of the characters. So I'm sure he will, as are my husband and I. So I'm sure my nephew will find some humor in the fact that his dad is one of the characters.
Yeah, speaking of your husband, a lot of people are in relationships and they don't last because one of the partners has something. We all have something, but sometimes it doesn't work out. How has your husband been able to support you through everything?
I think for him, I was just very, very blessed to have a very patient husband. He is just got a really naturally kind of calm, quiet, confident character. And a very godly character. So I think as a result of that, he's just been very patient with me. I know there have been times where I've kind of pushed him, but I think he would say that I suffered a lot with it silently. I don't know that he necessarily saw all the things. But he's just been a great support. And I would just encourage people to, get counseling if there's times where you feel like you're not communicating, especially when you're rehabilitating with OCD, because it can be a slow process. It's not an overnight, all of a sudden the compulsions stop. So that can be really frustrating for a partner. So I think having a third party give relationship techniques is definitely a helper.
Yeah, a lot of people say to me that if they're suffering, from something, if they've suffered for 5 years, well, it's going to take double that to, be rehabilitated or to get over or whatever you may call it from that, because it took them that long to feel those feelings and it's going to take even longer to undo them.
Right. Absolutely.
And, like a lot of people, we want it to happen overnight, but it certainly doesn't.
No. It doesn't. But that's actually part of I guess that's kind of the good part, right? Like there's a little bit of character building that can happen and we can set that example hopefully for our kids. It's not always pretty.
No, it's not. But what have you learned about yourself, through all of this?
I think it's been refreshing for me to feel a sense of confidence in my weakness. Knowing that God, created me with all of my gifts and just who I am, and to always feel for so long to feel like this rapid brain and this worrying person could do something with it that would be a blessing to others has just been really empowering and cool to see how God can do big things with weakness and with hard stuff. And that's been just a really fun experience.
Yeah, in one of your blogs, you say that you don't worry, you just pray. Your faith means a lot to you, and it certainly, I'm sure, has gotten you through a lot of hard times and more challenging ones as well. I feel like
Yes.
people, when they're suffering from something, they need that outlet. They need something to feel like they're not, that something else is in bigger control.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, honestly, I hope people read my book, and I hope that they read that there is a God who loves them, and that no matter what their fears are, even if they have to do with God, because a lot of OCD fears um, do revolve, particularly with Christians, around losing their faith and about God rejecting them if they do something wrong or think something wrong. And I just hope that they feel peace, that that's not how it works, and that the brain is powerful, but God is more powerful, and OCD lies, but God doesn't. So those are the messages that I hope people take away from the book in particular, and my blog.
Have you been able to coach anyone, through their feelings, through writing your book or your blog or just talking to others?
Well, actually, I have met so many people who have OCD through this experience. And it's been so neat to like talk to people who struggle with the same thing I do. I didn't have that before. There's actually one friendship in particular with a young girl who lives in England, and we met through some different circles with the book, and she's become one of my closest friends, and we're able to talk about OCD and our lives, and we've never met, and yet we are able to be there for each other and give each other strategies. And I just that would have never happened had I not been open about my OCD. So it has been fun to walk alongside. I mean, I say fun as in kind of just very gratifying to be able to walk with someone in a similar way with struggles that I actually have as well.
Is there ever a time when you just feel completely free?
Oh, completely free. I would say there's probably two times when I feel completely free. And one would be when I'm at worship on Sunday, because I just feel very free there. I feel it's just a good reset for my soul. So that would be one place that I feel free. And then I also feel really, really free at the beach. Just the wide open spaces of the sand, letting my kids be able to play and not worry about, cars and stuff like that. There's just the ocean. And that would be another time that I just feel I'm in God's creation. I'm, with my family who I love. And so that would be another time that I feel free.
Good for you with all the sand and the water and the things on the
I know.
beach.
And my husband would say, "Why are you saying that? Because all you do is fear that the children are going to go floating out into the deep." But somehow it feels very freeing, I guess.
It really does. I always reminisce about going to the beach as a kid, going through certain things. Every time I would go to the beach, I would feel free. I get that, it is like you're in God's creation and not around all the hustle and bustle and all the other things that are your normal. It's a different way to just really escape.
It is, and actually kind of ironic for me now, because for a long time in my childhood years, going on vacation to the beach was actually a time where I worried the most because we weren't busy. And with OCD, being busy is a good distraction. And so it's only been until recent years that going to the beach and being on vacation was actually enjoyable for me. So I think that's another reason probably why I feel especially free when I'm there, because it's finally a place where my OCD doesn't win anymore. So that's pretty cool.
That is really cool. It's definitely a way that you feel empowered.
Yes, it's very empowering to be able to go back to a place where I suffered a lot, but now feel great joy.
Yeah. Are there other places you like to vacation to, or is that pretty much where you all go?
That's pretty much where we go. I think we have a laundry list of places we would like to go, but that's our go-to.
Yeah. If somebody is listening right now and they can relate to your story, is there anything you would like to tell them?
Oh, I would like to tell them lots of things, but I would think the main thing is that our thoughts are just that. They're just thoughts. and you're not the horrible things that you think you are or you worry that you are, and that there's hope, and that, a lot of the fear of going into counseling is that you have to say those things out loud, and that's hard to do. And my encouragement would be, take that step, go, to that professional, and they are going to give you tools and strategies that can really get your life back. But I think the main thing that I would just say is, you're not a freak. You are not unlovable, and you're not all those labels that your OCD is trying to tell you that you are, and that you can live with this and you can live with joy.
Yeah, and to be honest, everybody has something, One person might have OCD, somebody else might have depression, somebody else might have something else. I mean, there's a million different labels out there, and everybody has something. That's what makes us all unique.
Yes, it is what makes us unique, and it's what makes us have to rely on God and rely on each other. So it's just an opportunity to do that. But I think just trying to communicate that bravery, and that you can go to therapy. I know it feels impossible, but it's possible.
Yeah, and to find that outlet for themselves. Everybody has a different outlet. Yours is faith and running, and others might be something different. It looks different for everyone, but you need that outlet to be able to know that you can defeat this if that's what you want to do.
100%. Absolutely.
Well, I always ask this question to all of my guests, so here we go. At UMFS, we value our families, our team, our youth as being unwavering champions. How do you define an unwavering champion?
Oh, man, this is a tough question. I have really thought long and hard about this. I would say an unwavering champion is someone who suffers with love and bravery and joy. That is really, to me, I mean, someone who can suffer great things. I don't just mean OCD. I just mean in life, and can do so in a way that is just so brave. And that doesn't mean that it should be a pretty process, but just that it would be authentic and genuine, I think is really an unwavering champion.
Well, Meghan, it has been so nice to have you on today. If somebody wants to find your blog and your book, would you mind sharing that again?
Absolutely. You can find my book at Amazon, a place we all know very well now. And then my blog is www.MeghanNewkirk.writes.com. And that's Meghan with an H, Meghan, NewkirkWrites.com. So that's where you can find all of my kind of weekly whims and musings about OCD.
And I definitely hope people check it out, because it's a beautifully well-written blog and book as well. So thank you.
Well, Angela, I can't tell you how much that means to me, because people say that and I'm like, are you sure you read the right website? So that really means a lot to me that you would say that.
Yeah, I even have quotes down here, It was really good.
Man.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. I mean, you have no idea, really. I feel undeserving of the kind of accolade, but I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Do you have anything else you'd like to share that maybe we didn't touch on?
No, I think we touched on everything, and I just really want to encourage people that there is just so much hope, and there's ways to do the work, and it's worth doing the work.
It is. It really is. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Angela.
Of course. This is Angela Rivers with Fredericksburg Mission. Of course, if you'd like to learn more about becoming a foster parent, please visit www.umfs.org/foster. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us. I'm Angela Rivers with Fredericksburg Mission. Tune in at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Join us again next week for our next episode.
How do you shorten the time it takes to buy a car? Car buying just got easier. Pohanka365.com lets you complete as much or as little of the car buying process online. Pohanka365.com. Car buying simplified. Anytime, anywhere.